Okay, so we want to talk about week one on Southern Sports Gumbo tonight. We have three really good college games week one with top 25 type matchups, two top 10 type matchups. But we have kind of the lead into the day. Well, it's a midday game, it's the afternoon game, Alabama and Florida State. But out of the three games, it's the one that doesn't have the two top 10 teams in it. But it's an interesting game because you have Kalen DeBoer in his second year, kind of as a year last year where Bama finished 9-4, when they're used to being in the playoffs with four teams, and they didn't even make the 12-team playoff. So obviously, Bama fans and the nation is ready to see, if Bama's going to bounce back or where they're going to be. And it's on the road, and again, they struggled on the road some last year, so that makes the game interesting. And they're playing a Florida State team who 2 years ago finished their regular season undefeated and then really fell back last year. So again, you have the Florida State fans and their fan base, hoping that they're going to be back. So you have some anticipation between those two fan bases in that this year, hopefully they're going to compete at a better level, and those two teams want to be in the playoffs. My personal opinion in the game, I think, again, another interesting part of it, Florida State, Mike Norvell hired a new offensive coordinator and brought Gus Malzahn, who's been a head coach at Auburn and UCF there. And I think you'll see him do some things much like he did at Auburn. They'll run some up-tempo, and he'll try to do some things to catch at Bama and their defense off balance. The Boston College quarterback transfer Castellano, I believe is how you say it.
Thomas Castellano. He's Ware County, a South Georgia kid.
Yes. He's a running quarterback, which fits a lot what Malzahn wants. He wants someone that can get in that tempo offense and get out on the edges sometimes and be a dual threat guy. That's when he's at his best. So I think you'll see Florida State do some things to catch Bama off balance and run some tempo, and Castellano will have some good moments. But personally, when I look at Bama, I just think they're too strong across the board for Florida State, and I see Bama winning that game in a 28-17 type game. I think Florida State will have their moments. I just don't think they have enough back yet to have the staying power to play a team. Bama has playoff talent. If you took roster, they're in the top 5 rosters probably in the country. I just think they'll wear them down. But I am interested to see how they're going to play on the road. Ty Simpson's first game. I really don't have a lot of high anticipations for him, even though he's got a lot around him. And Jam Miller, we already know the running back for Bama. He's out that game. They still have a lot of depth with Daniel Hill, Richard Young, and other running backs that they've got. And then that wide receiver room with Gordon, Ryan Williams, and Jeremy Bernard. They're deep there, solid defensively. So I don't think that Florida State will be able to do anything consistent offensively. I think they'll just hit them with some pockets of big plays, and that's how they'll score. What do you got?
A note about Castellanos. You may not remember this, but Malzahn recruited him to Central Florida,
Yes.
out of Ware County.
That's right.
And then when Malzahn left, Castellanos went up to Boston College. Things didn't work out for him up there, and he came back with Malzahn down to Florida State, which is a little closer to home for him too. I expect him to have a decent year because he's an incredible athlete. A little bit of a me kid. Hopefully, it's something that he's grown out of. Because he's certainly talented as a dual threat quarterback. Took Ware County to, I want to say, the semis and then maybe one or two championship games in his year starting there. Never won it with him, but did get there at the end. The kid's a gamer. Like I said, great athlete. I actually thought that when he got to college, he might switch positions because I could see him being an NFL player at a different position. But perhaps he works out at quarterback for Florida State. But I think that Malzahn and him will mesh well together. They've already got a history there. He knows what Malzahn wants. Malzahn knows what he gets in Castellanos. So he's got the ability to keep Bama's defense on their toes if they can't contain him.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me with Florida State, week one, they're going to be starting 3 new wide receivers, 4 new offensive linemen from the transfer portal, and a brand new quarterback. That's a lot of new guys that, have only been working together for a couple months now. I think that they have a decent season. I don't think it starts in week one by any means. Gus Malzahn's going to be a good addition for them. I think like you said, Sweet's quarterback play will be better for sure. I have a tough time with everything Bama's bringing back on defense. To think 4 transfer offensive linemen, 3 transfer wide receivers are gonna do much against the Bama defense.
Just a quick note on Castellanos. His sophomore year at BC, his first year at BC, he threw for about 2,300 yards, had about a 57% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns, 14 picks, but he also rushed for over 1,100 yards as well. So he's certainly got the talent to make stuff happen if the pocket breaks down or plays break down or whatever. And I think anytime you have a quarterback like that, as we experienced having Jaden Daniels a few years ago, that's always dangerous, and it can keep it can make up for a lot of woes with a lesser talented team when a kid like that goes crazy. I can't remember the kid from Ole Miss. It was about 5 years or so ago, but he ran for about 4 miles against LSU's defense. What was that quarterback's name? John Reese Plumlee, wasn't it?
Yes, that's who it was.
The dual threat kid.
Yes.
Yeah, when you have a kid like that can break containment and make plays, it's just it's they've got a fighters, they got a puncher's chance with. I think they got a puncher's chance. I don't think they'll win the game, but if Castellanos can stay healthy, he'll keep Florida State in a lot of games.
And you were right. I'm glad you brought that up about him playing for Malzahn previously. There's that connection. And a lot of people are kind of comparing him to Nick Marshall that was there at Auburn. And you referenced the 1,100 yards rushing, 20. It's very comparable to how Marshall played under Malzahn. So I definitely think we'll see them get better throughout the year. But like you said, Daniel, I don't see – it's just too much to accomplish in game one with a lot of new players, experienced players, but they haven't played together against one of the most experienced teams in college football.
Yeah, Bama from the line is given 13.5. I really like Bama at 13.5 in this one.
You'd lay the 13.5, huh?
I would lay the 13.5. I think it's a 17-24 point win.
See that's interesting to me because I'm not sure I'd lay 13.5. I think Bama wins, but again, I go back. DeBoer's got to prove to me that he can be a dominant coach on the road. To me, his games at Washington and even last year at Alabama, he goes on the road and lays some eggs sometimes. I think they'll win, but I just think they'll have, and with Ty Simpson it being his first game, I think they'll have a couple of dry periods in the game.
I think they're going to lean heavy on the run game week one, even with Jam Miller being out.
They certainly would.
Florida State defense also, from their projected depth chart, they're going to have 5 or 6 transfers starting on that side of the ball too. I know they're coming off a 2-10 season, so transfers were definitely needed. But a week one game against a Power 4 team like Alabama, especially an SEC team, I don't know if 14 transfers is getting it done for you.
It's on the spread.
13.5 is a lot of points. And the one thing gun to my head, I'd probably take Florida State. And the reason being is because of what you said, Daniel. I think Bama's going to rely heavily on the run game. And I think that shortens the game, keeps the score lower. And I think that Florida State's going to have a little success with Castellanos breaking containment and stretching out the game as well. So, like I said, it wouldn't surprise me if Bama won by 3 touchdowns. Not at all. In a game where two teams are going to lean heavily on the run, it just stretches out the clock, makes the game a lot shorter. I'd probably take 13.5 in Florida State. I wouldn't bet the game, honestly. Gun to my head, I'd take Florida State in the points.
That's kind of where I'm at.
I also like the under at 50.5.
I might like that.
I like that too. With I could see a 28-14, 28-17 type, something like that, 24-17, somewhere. I like that as well.
Yep. I think we all agree on that. Two of us think that it could be within 13, within 14. We all think Bama's going to win. All right, so the next game we got that morning, I think it's a noon kickoff, is that Ohio State-Texas game. So who wants to jump in with that one?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So, Ohio State's coming off a national title. They've either got the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in the entire country in Jeremiah Smith. depending on what area of the country you ask. Ryan Williams may get a little more love at times. They do have Sayan, getting the nod at quarterback, so that's going to be interesting. But kind of on the same side, Texas is starting Arch Manning, who, played at times last year, but this is really his year to start. So I think this is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think. I think it's going to be back and forth. Playing in Ohio State is never an easy task. I think that Texas wins by a late field goal. I think it's going to be a pretty good defensive game for both teams. Texas is pretty stout on defense. Ohio State's, got some really bright spots on defense too. So I think, however this game goes, I'm going to give Texas the edge with a late field goal. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the other way around with Ohio State with a late field goal. I don't think anybody's going to win by two or three touchdowns in this one. I think it's going to come down to which defense forces a turnover and which offense capitalizes on that turnover.
What's the line in the game?
I think Ohio State is a 2.5-point favorite.
Well, they say 3 points for a home, so they got it pretty much a push game, and that's how I feel. I really won't be surprised whoever wins the game. The only thing that would surprise me is a blowout one way or another. I think these teams are evenly matched. They're two of the most talented teams in the country. Arch is, the babe, the boy, everybody and their dog is waiting on this kid, and this is his time to shine. I think he's going to be a solid college player. I'm not sure that it's going to be tough to live up to the hype because there's just been so much of it. But I think he's going to be solid. And Ohio State's got a brand new quarterback as well, getting his first true snaps. So two highly sought after quarterbacks facing off in their pretty much their debuts against each other. Top 5 game, national stage. I look forward to a great game. Scheme wise, while they won a national title last year, I still don't really trust him all that much. That's really rough to say for someone who just won a national title. But there were a lot of Ohio State fans that were ready to run him out on a rail last year if he hadn't won it all, because they were the year before as well. They're a hard bunch to please, like a lot of fan bases. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. Like you, Daniel, I think it comes down to the wire. I would lean Texas as well. I just think they've got a little too many horses for Ohio State this year. I think both teams are playoff teams, but I think Texas goes up there and gets the upset.
Yeah, and the over/under set at 47.5.
That's a tough one to pick there. I'm like both of you. I think I like Texas, and some games are matchups, and to me, this game is a matchup game. And where I'm coming from there, I really like Texas defense against a first-time quarterback. Their secondary is going to be one of the best secondaries in college football. Malik Muhammad's played a lot of games at cornerback. Their safeties, Michael Taft was really good last year. He's a very experienced guy and a leader. And then Jalen Gilbo's played a lot of games too. That's the other cornerback. And then Derek Williams was a highly recruited guy. So their secondary is really good. And then where I think the matchup that I like for Texas is Colin Simmons, the sophomore edge player for Texas. He had 9 sacks last year as a freshman, and he didn't play full time as a freshman in that. And if you look at Ohio State, they have a transfer tackle from Rice, Ethan Anianwe, and give me Colin Simmons and his athletic ability over a transfer from Rice. I think that's going to be the difference in the game. I think Texas will put a lot of pressure on Sayan, and being his first game, all it's going to take is a couple of turnovers in a game like that to swing it one way or the other. And I guess that's what I would put my trust in Arch. He's not played a lot, but he has played some, and even in a game, he played a little bit in that Georgia game. So he's seen the bullets come at him pretty hard. And this is going to be that first experience for Sayan, and he's going to play a really tough secondary with one of the best pass rushers in college football. And so I like the matchup right there for Texas, and I think Texas pulls out a win, 3 to 7 point win. But it'll be a great game to watch.
Yeah, the Texas offensive line, Simmons is going to be great for Texas. A guy I like on that defensive end side for Ohio State's Bo Atkinson, the transfer from North Carolina, who had 12 and a half tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks there. He's not a guy coming from Rice. North Carolina still played somewhat competitive football last year, at least in a league. So I think he's a guy that, the Texas offensive line is going to have to zero in on. Because if he's just blowing by him, I don't know if you want Arch to get hit 5 or 6 times in this one.
Don't you think that's where the two running backs for Texas with Baxter and Wisner, and they got a lot of experience too, that again, if the pass rush is getting there, I just like Texas running backs and their ability to run the ball to calm the game down if they need be, better than Ohio State, or both their running backs last year in the NFL this year. So
I,
go ahead, Larry.
I think the running backs, I think a big job for both running backs, both teams is going to be picking up the blitzes and stuff too, and keeping Sayin and Arch upright. I think that both defensive coordinators are going to try to get after the quarterback and rattle him. Like I said, first big game for both of them. I could see a lot of blitzes, lots of stunting and stuff, trying to mix them up and get in their head, making them see ghosts and stuff. I expect there to be a lot of funky scheming on both sides on defensively from both teams. I do think that, like I said, Simmons is just a different animal. It's not going to surprise me if that kid gets 15 to 18 sacks this season.
I agree.
But what do you do with it? What do you do with an end like that? You run the ball right at him. You try to run the ball right at him. And I think Ohio State can have success running the ball at Simmons. He's not the heaviest kid. If he can just pin his ears back and go, he's gonna create a lot of problems. But if you run the ball at him, get him playing on his heels a little bit, I think Ohio State can have some success against him. That being said, I say the same thing for Texas going at your transfer there. Those rushers, the best thing to do is go right at them in the run game, punch them in the mouth, and see what they got. Like I said, I do. The 47. I could see this being another game like the first game we discussed, a game that they, for all the hypes of the quarterbacks, I could see them both wanting to slow it down and let them get their sea legs under them. So I could see a 21-17 type game, something like that.
And, an interesting story at Ohio State. Jim Knowles leaves for Penn State in the offseason. Matt Patricia comes in. How is that defense going to look? They still have dudes on the defensive side. But from a scheme standpoint, we see it all the time in the SEC. Regardless of how good a coordinator is, that first year can be a little rocky at times.
Yep. So we all three like Texas in a tight game. Does anybody think the over at that? What'd you say, 47.5?
Yeah, 47.5. I could see a 28-24 game potentially. I do think 21-17, 20-17, 24-21's more likely. But if a team scores 4 touchdowns, I mean, it's without a doubt going over. Nobody's going to win 28-14 in this game. So I do lean under a little more. I'd feel better if it was like the Alabama game at 50.5. I'd like the under maybe a little more. But yeah, I would take I would take Texas getting 2.5, and I would take the under in this one.
Sweet, what you think on the over under?
I'm like you guys. I don't see a high scoring game. I see a 24-17, 21-17, 24-21 type game. I mean, you could get a couple turnovers, maybe a special teams touchdown that pushes it over. That's one thing that we haven't talked about, and it's something where that could be the turning point in the game, is a late pick or blocked punt or something like that.
I think you get an over based on turnovers with two young quarterbacks. I like that what you just said right there. That's where I really go. All right, so the last game of the day, the one that probably excites us all the most, and that is LSU and Clemson. And there's going to be a lot of passion in that game. Any game that Dabo coaches in, he's going to bring a lot of passion. He is the BYOG coach. Bring your own guts. And then you have Kelly already saying where the real Death Valley is. So plenty of spice to this one. Kelly says he's got to win game 1 this year. And, again, Clemson got embarrassed last year by Georgia. So, like I say, there's a lot of hope with both teams with experienced quarterbacks. Who wants to go at this one?
Kelly's right. He does need to win this game. He's 0-3 in openers, and LSU hasn't looked good in any of them. They've looked woefully unprepared. One of the biggest issues I've had is a lot of the guys who are starting week one, a few weeks later, they're not even in the rotation anymore. So that tells me that what they're seeing all spring and all summer, they're missing something on the evaluations, because come game time, once you get a few weeks into the season, those guys are, some of them are not even in the rotation anymore, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. They need to get that right from the jump, and need to make things happen. Nussmeier, he's got to stay upright, but one thing he needs to do this year is he needs to tuck the ball and run occasionally to keep teams honest. Even if he runs into the line of scrimmage and slides or whatever, he cannot just continue to hold on to the ball and then, chuck it. He's got to keep teams honest this year. I know it's not a big thing with him, but he's mobile enough that he can. Last year was it was a little odd to watch him just refuse to run the ball. I don't know if that was by design or his own doing, but that's not going to work this year. He's going to have to keep some teams honest.
Couldn't agree with you more, especially about who plays early. We saw with Cameron Wire on the offensive line. Tremont Short started in 22, and by week 4 they weren't to be seen. Mike Jones. Not talking anything about those guys. Again, we just didn't get the evaluation right going into the first game, and so I think they have to get the best 22 on the field, at least the best 21 at 22 on the field. I feel good about Nuss and the things you're hearing. I was listening to Blake Ruffino, and he was talking, he goes to every practice, and he was talking about this time last year, Nuss had 13 interceptions through fall camp, and this year he's only thrown 1. And they are seeing him step up and run the ball more. So I think he's just more comfortable, and that's kind of what they're saying. Everybody's been to practice said he's stepped way up. The defense is going to be strong. I know Cade Klubnik's getting a lot of positive things said, and he's a good quarterback. He's going to be in the NFL. A lot of people talk about he played well against Texas last year, but I go back and I watch that game, and he played well. So let me go there. But when you go back and watch that Texas game, Texas was up 21 points, and they played a lot of two-deep safety where they gave him passes. Once they were ahead 21, they weren't bringing pressure. They weren't, doing things to try to disrupt him. They were playing safe, trying to run the clock and get out of there with a win, which is what they did. And the other part that I think LSU can do possibly, now we all have heard, the stories about the offensive line, and that's the weakness for LSU. And you got to get that right. And again, there's truth there. I feel good about the tackles. I feel good about Braylon Moore. Josh Thompson, I think, will be all right. I want to really see Colin Eccles or Kern at the other guard position, but we'll see. But when you look at Clemson, as much talk as they get on their defensive line with Woods and T.J. Parker, they gave up 4.7 yards a rush last year. Texas almost hit them for almost 300 yards rushing last year in that game. And you look, so many games they gave up more than 150 yards. SMU, who had a talented athletic guy at running back who was a wide receiver, and they moved him back there, and he had over 100 yards rushing against Texas. And if you go back and you watch some of those games that Clemson played, T.J. Parker, Sweet, you mentioned good pass rushers, run it at him. That's what teams did last year to Parker. And you can run at him. And there were games that Woods you could run it at him. So I think LSU has to find a way to be successful and be physical some and run it right at those guys. Obviously, Nuss is going to throw the ball, and LSU is going to throw the ball at least 50% of the time in that game with the receivers they've got. No question about that. But LSU has to have some success and try to run the ball for 150 yards, and I think the potential is there. On the Clemson side, I love their wide receiver group. They have a solid secondary. I think overall they're a good team. I think it's a good matchup. I agree 100%. Kelly's got to win this one. And the one thing that I like is I think this camp has been more about competition, so hopefully they get those right guys in the lineup. So it hasn't been about some of the other things in the past. I feel like in the past he's awarded guys that did all the right things, which you've got to do. But I feel like this has been about who's playing the best in practice. And so I think they will start. I think we'll know 21 of the 22 starters for most of this season. It may be 20. You're going to see if DJ Pickett comes along and ends up starting. I don't know that he'll start this game because Woodland's had a good camp and Stanton's had a good camp. But I think you'll see 20 two good players out there for the team. And I think LSU wins this in a close game with a lot of heart between guys like Weeks and Nuss, a lot of leadership on the team. Pyburn supplying a lot of leadership. Halsey, the safety, they've said he's played really well and came up and run support really good. And we've not had a safety do that in years. I mean, not
That's
2 or 3
Delpit.
years, but years. Yes, since Grant Delpit, we hadn't had a safety do that. So I think there's going to be enough intangibles there that LSU is going to sneak out a win, 31-24, I'll say.
Yeah,
I
I'm a numbers and an odds person. The odds of LSU losing another season opener, you gotta almost take the Tigers. We're +4 right now. The one number that sticks out to me is the over under at 57.5. I look at Clemson last year. They open up against Georgia. Georgia wins 3. They play South Carolina in the regular season. Carolina wins 17-14. They play Texas in the college football playoff. 38, and I think that was aided by a late score. I don't think Clemson scores 20 plus points against LSU. I think everybody's underrating the LSU defense this year. So, I think LSU comes away with a win, and this one goes under 2. And, the Tigers are happy leaving Clemson, and Dabo Sweeney and the Clemson Tigers are just hanging out in Death Valley Junior for the next season.
What you think, Sweets? Who you giving the win to?
I agree. I think that LSU sneaks this one out. I think defensively, we're really gonna tighten the screws on it. I don't see Klubnik and company having a ton of success. What did you say the over under was 57, 58? Boy, that seems like a lot of points because I don't know that
Yeah,
Clemson's gonna.
57 and a half.
I don't think Clemson scores 21. That being said, I don't think LSU scores 35. So I would definitely take the under in that scenario. That just seems like an awful lot of points to me, and especially for as hyped as both defenses are. But Vegas doesn't miss too often, so it'll probably be around there somewhere.
And it has moved up. 7 days ago it was at, I think, 52 and a half or 53 and a half. So there's been 4 or 5 points of movement,
That's a lot.
you know, for the points. That's I'm eager to see, 2 Saturdays from now where it's at, on game day. If it opened up as 2.5, it's up to 4 now. If LSU loses this game by a touchdown, boys, I may not have internet to do these podcasts anymore. That's how confident I am in the LSU defense.
I'm with
And
you.
we hadn't even mentioned Harold.
What'd you say? I didn't hear you.
Go ahead, Larry.
No, go ahead. I didn't
I
hear
was
what you
going to say
said.
we hadn't even mentioned Harold Perkins and what he could do.
Yeah, I mean,
We
with
hadn't even mentioned
Perkins.
Harold Perkins and what he could do in this game coming off the edge.
Perkins and Weeks. I'm really excited to see what how they're going to use Perkins this year. We've heard, he's been at Star, he's been here, he's been there. I know they wanted to move him inside to help his pro prospects and stuff, but I think he also, the end the end game is to win, and you got to put him in a position that's going to help LSU win ball games the most. And I think the best place for Perkins is moving him around. He doesn't have a spot. Just keep them guessing. Because if you line him up, inside, outside, wherever, somebody's always going to be spying him. Okay. That being said, you're going to open up opportunities for Clyburn and other players on the defense, Weeks and guys like that. So I think with LSU's playmakers on defense, I think that we're going to give Clemson a lot of fits, and that's why I like LSU winning the game.
Yeah, again, Dan, you mentioned the LSU defense being underrated, and I think they are. I think this is a top 15 and potentially a top 10 defense at the end of the year. And we definitely have a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback. Perkins, Peyton, Gabe Relaford, I think he's going to really take a step forward.
Mm.
Bernard
McKinley.
Good, defensive tackle, pressure up the middle. Weeks can come. Kinley. So, again, and he had 2 sacks last year from a defensive tackle position, and he didn't start. Probably played 25% of the snaps. So, when you look at Clemson, they did a good job of protecting the quarterback last year. They were 25th in giving up sacks at 2.6 a game. But they didn't play anybody with the potential to rush the passer like LSU has this year. So I think you're going to see at least 4 sacks in this game. for LSU. And again, I think that's the difference. Klubnik over his career has had a little bit of history with, protecting the ball from a fumbling standpoint. I think if you get pressure on him, you might get one or two of those fumbles. And
Yep.
again, they're moving a receiver to running back. I do think they're running. I do think he's a good athlete. But again, last year they struggled running the ball, and I just think they're going to be one-dimensional. It's going to give our defense a little bit of an advantage. So I like LSU. I don't know about the over though. I lean under.
Yeah, I
Kev,
lean under in all three games and SEC in all three.
Kev, I think you made a good point about the turnovers there, and Klubnik, not being able to hold on to the ball. I think that that a strip sack or two, maybe getting a running back to cough one up in the backfield, something like that. Those are going to be big points in the game. I look for LSU to get a couple turnovers and maybe shorten the field for the offense. And overall, I just think LSU is prepared for this one. I think that Kelly's going to finally get that elusive game one win.
I
Daniel,
can't
is
hear
it?
anything you're saying, Sweets.
Oh,
Right there at
you
the
were
end.
laughing.
Everything
I
else
was
good,
like,
though. I think we can just cut it right there because it was good. Everything else you did, except for right there at the end, it was coming through good. I think this was pretty good.
Yeah, your last couple sentences just completely went out tonight. But
Jesus.
that was the only time there was ever an issue.
The other night when I was holding the phone, I just have a nervous habit of just tapping the phone. I was looking down, it's like I keep hitting the fucking microphone and keep shutting it off, so it sounds like I'm going in and out. I'm like I look like a retard on here. My God, sorry, I can't
All
say
right, well
that.
there you
I
have
look
it
like an
for
idiot.
week one for Southern Sports Gumbo. We're all pretty much in the same. I mean, so we're all going to probably miss every game because we all agreed on the three winners, and so you know how that goes. So for everybody else out there, you probably take Florida State, Ohio State, and Clemson, and you'll probably be right. But anyhow, interesting stuff, good stuff, and we'll see
Yeah.
how we come out.
And just a quick disclaimer for anybody who's listening to this, do not follow our betting advice. We are not professional gamblers. There's a reason why
You're
we're on
still cutting in
podcasts.
and out bad, Sweets.
Fuck it.
It's amazing though that it lasted really good and like a lot of times it does. It's really good there for a long time, and then when it starts, it just kind of goes in and out.
Yeah.
I think we have to not let his phone or iPad or computer find out we're close to ending. I think we need to just pick a team like Southern and North Carolina Tech are playing a game. We're going to talk about them at the very end. And then
it doesn't matter.
when we get to that point, it's just over.
I've got to figure out how to get it onto the iPad. I just think it'll be a lot easier for me. But
I think we had some good back and forth though. I think if people watch that would be. I think we had some good points.
Yeah, I do too. I think that there was no homerism with LSU.
Daniels.
I mean, I think that we